Hi, this is Bill Hartzer, and this is the Digital Marketing Podcast with Bill Hartzer from March 31st, 2022. What today I want to focus on specifically is your most valuable digital asset, and frankly, your domain name. Your domain name is actually your most valuable, most important asset. And frankly, just think about it. If you lose your domain name, and obviously, we have a website, we may be paying for, we may be paying actually for, let's see. So anyway, so we may be paying for, I had a technical problem right here. I'm going to try and fix this technical problem. And of course, there's always something going on. I believe it's some kind of Wi-Fi issue. We're going to switch to another Wi-Fi network. Just hold on. Let's see. Okay, so we can keep this Facebook Live going. And we're going to go back to Facebook Live here. And sorry for the convenience. We're going to go ahead and start our Facebook Live again. And digital marketing podcast with Bill Hartzer. Let's see. Or just start the live video on Facebook. Technical problems. They always happen. So we're back live on Facebook, and so we're talking today about your most valuable digital asset, and that's your domain name. That's your internet domain name. And think about it. We have a website, and we may be paying for Facebook ads. We may be paying for Google ads, and so forth. And we've built up a reputation, and where people going to our domain name, and that's where things start. Well, yeah, your domain is your most valuable digital asset. We're paying and to protect and keep our, let's say WordPress websites, our websites up and running, and so forth. However, I'm very surprised that people have less security on their domain names than we do, than they do on their websites. They go to cheap registrars. We pay a domain registrar as the least amount as possible for domain registration, and then we don't pay any attention. The reason why I'm bringing this all up is because recovering the stolen domain names actually takes a fair amount of my time, because I do run a company called D and Protect, and we protect domain names, and we also recovered stolen domain names. And so we have to realize that you lose your domain name is a huge, massive hit to your business. Your business stops literally instantly. You have no access to the website, no leads coming in. And maybe you have ad campaigns that are running, sending traffic to a domain name. And not only that, we end up with losing access to email. And hopefully you're not using a Gmail account for your business. You're using your name at your name at your domain name, and so forth as your email. But I see this happening time and time over and over again, several times a day, because like I said, I help people recover their stolen domain names. So I want to go through my seven tips of things that you can do right now. You should be when you finish hearing this or seeing this on Facebook or seeing the YouTube video, you should be going and making notes right now, and then going ahead and securing your most valuable asset, your domain name. So let's start with, your domain name account. You have a registrar account, and that's going to be different. Your domain name registrar account is going to be is going to be a separate account than your web hosting or your website account. So so what you need to do is make sure that the only authorized people have access to your domain name registrar account. And frankly, it comes down to your web designer and your web developer absolutely does not need access to your domain name registrar account. If if changes need to be made, and they're moving your website or something, then they need to tell you what changes to make, and you need to make them. Do not give access at any time to your website developer, your agency, your PR person, your web guy, anything, because frankly, one of the issues that we have on a very regular basis is that they company gave access to their web designer. Well, the web designer then went in and transferred the domain name literally to themselves and stole. At that time, when they did that, they changed the ownership and they stole the domain name. So we're still embattled in certain cases right now where the web design firm literally stole the domain name because for whatever reason. Okay, so let's go into the GoDaddy account, the Epic account, the Network Solutions account, wherever you have your domain name. That's a domain name registrar. That's going to be different than the registry. You generally don't have access to the registry, but you'll have access through the domain name registrar, and wherever you paid for the domain name. You want to make sure that 2FA, two-factor authentication, if it's offered by your domain name registrar, number one, if they don't offer it, you need to start transferring your domain name to another secure domain name registrar. But most of the registrars do offer this. There's two ways that they offer this. Number one, they offer two-factor authentication through an email. So when you go to log in to your account, they'll send you an email with a code. That's not very secure. Then the other option is that they will send you a text message. Again, that is actually not secure. We've had stolen domain names or domain names stolen, and that I've had to get back where somebody did have the text message option turned on, and they still got into the account. The third option I'm talking about is actually is an option where you actually have a physical key, and I don't have one. I don't have one of them immediately available right here. However, it's called a YubiKey, or basically it's a key fob that either has a USB type of scenario where you plug it into your laptop, or it might have a NFC chip where you can tap your phone with your key fob and it will allow access, or there's also one that has a Bluetooth that goes by Bluetooth, and you hit a button on the key fob and it will allow that access to happen. In this case, there's actually a physical key or a device that is connected. So basically, one of the things is, one of the ways to get this, you can go to YubiKey, YubiKey, go directly to them and get your key there, your physical key. Or you can actually, Google offers this a Google Advanced Protection System, where basically if you do have a Google account and you have Google AdWords or Google Ads, or you're using Gmail and you want to really secure that account, then you can get Google Advanced Protection. There is a fee anywhere between $75 and $100 for those particular key fob devices. And basically what, so the other option is rather than having, getting the key directly from Google, you can go to YubiKey, get a physical key, and there's other domain registrars such as Epic, for example, that that I recommend. You have to have an app, and rather than sending a text message to you or an email, you will actually get. You have to go into the app. I use Authy, AUTHY. There's different authenticator related apps. Essentially, you open, when you go to log in, you have to open the app and you have to select a code or enter a code. When you set those up, you can actually have codes that you can print out on a list if you for a backup. Essentially, when you get that code, that then will actually also be connected. Can be also connected with your phone, the phone in the app, and gets the code, and then essentially you will have the opportunity to click or to use the key. That is right now the most secure method. Google offers that with the Google Advanced Protection. You can get those YubiKeys separately and use them with other related with apps that you can connect. So the other part, so here's number 2 is turn on registry lock. And so when you go into your domain registrar account, there are security options. There's some additional options there that you can turn on. Things like registry lock, it'll have the word lock. So, they refer to it, different companies refer to it separate. It might be executive lock. It just might be lock your domain. Those all should be free. Essentially, it's just another level of protection. Some registrars, offer it, some don't. I know that with if you have fabulous.com, they offer an option at fabulous.com where specifically you can tell them to do something. For example, you can tell them when you are making changes to the account, then they need to call you and you then give them a certain code. Something like that, or you can tell them to email you at a separate email address and so forth. There's different options like that, and so check with your registrar. Put on the lock if you can. Keep in mind, however, you have that lock on. Somebody gets into your domain registrar account, they can go in, they can turn off 2FA, they can turn off the registry lock, they can do some things like that. Number 3. To protect your domain name, register your domain name for at least 5 years. And the reason why I'm saying that is that basically, if a domain name is lost, stolen, or and is stolen or transferred to another registrar, there will not be any question as to when that maybe you didn't maybe you didn't renew the domain name. If the domain name is registered till 2025, which is only 3 years from now, okay, and the domain name is stolen tomorrow, what actually will happen is there's sometimes some question of whether or not, oh well, this person didn't renew their domain name and that's why somebody else was able to buy it or get access to it. That'll rule that out. I don't want to get into really any specifics, but we've had stolen domain names that it's very clear that it is stolen and it did not expire because the person whose domain name it was, they registered it for 5 to 10 years, 5, 6, 7 years in advance. So that really helped when we went to recover that domain name and so forth. The other thing is that we're coming into territory number 4 on the reasons how to protect reasons why and how to protect your domain name is that, you should not, absolutely not rely on auto renew. I have people tell me, well, we registered for a year and the domain's supposed to renew, it automatically renews on my credit card, and the domain registrar, doesn't have any problem, they charge it. Well, frankly, I can tell you from my personal experience of helping people get their domain names back, that auto renew does not work 100% of the time. And I can tell you specifically that there's been situations where there were multiple credit cards on file with the domain name registrar, and the first one didn't go through because the card number, because expiration date or something like that. And there was another card on file which did work, and the domain registrar should have charged that other card. Well, they didn't, and the domain name then was lost. And so then that person ended up having to pay, $5,000 or $6,000 to buy the domain name back that they desperately needed back. So absolutely do not rely on auto renew, because I would turn it on. Frankly, I would turn it on, for domain names, and that's kind of a fail safe. But register your domain name for 5 years in advance at least, for domain names that you're actually actively using in your business. 6, 7, 8 years is not a problem. .com, with .com domain names, there is a limit to 10 years, and and that's more of an ICANN rule, and not necessarily by a domain name registration rule. I have to obviously mention the forever domain. You can register a domain name forever, which is, and there are some restrictions, but if for $300 $300 to $400, under $400, you can register a domain name forever, and just know that it will continue. And that's a service by Epic, the domain registrar. So again, number 4, do not rely absolutely on auto renew. Just don't, because it doesn't work all the time. Plain and simple. People lose domains, and I've had to help them get them back because of the fact that they relied on auto renew, and auto renew never worked. So never, ever, 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 ever use a free email account like Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook, et cetera, et cetera. Those accounts routinely get hacked, compromised, and so forth. And, I've had people come back to me and say, well, it's Gmail and I have 2FA turned on. Well, frankly, I'm dealing with the second or third case of the stolen domain name right now that they had Gmail, and that was used, and the person had 2FA turned on, and someone hacked the Gmail account and then went into the domain registrar from there. And now we're dealing with the fact that the domain registrar account was not hacked. So the domain registrar will not help us get the domain name back because the Gmail account was hacked. And they had 2FA turned on, not on the Gmail account, and they had 2FA turned on as well at the domain registrar. Hacker went in and turned both of those off. So the only exception is what I've mentioned before. If you have a Google account and you really think you have to use Gmail, now this is the domain name, okay? This is a domain name. So buy another domain name for $10 per year and use the email account with that domain, like bill@billhartzer.com and use that one if you're registering hartzer.com or another domain, and don't use that gmail.com, period. That's not my preference, because again, it gets hacked over and over again. And we've had to deal with this over and over again. So the only exception is if you have to use a Gmail and you feel like you don't want to use the domain email, then absolutely you have to pay for Google Advanced Protection and get the key fobs and use that protection. Now, if you don't, that's and then you're back to a free Gmail account and so forth, which is not secure. Okay. Now, the same thing is next. That brings us into number 6, email account on the Whois record. Email. Do not ever use the same email address as the domain name. So let's say, for example, Hartzer.com. Okay. I would never ever use something like domains@hartzer.com or bill@hartzer.com or whois@hartzer.com, whatever it is, okay, or admin or webmaster or whatever, on the Whois record for that same domain, Hartzer.com. You absolutely do not want to use the same email, because here's a perfect example. A guy goes in and he loses his domain name, and the only domain name on the the email address on the Whois account, Whois record, and the email address on the to log in, okay, to that registrar account is the email on that domain. So let's say Hartzer.com gets stolen, and on the Whois record I use bill@hartzer.com, and then on the domain registrar account I use bill@hartzer.com. Okay. Well, someone steals Hartzer.com, I cannot get access to the domain registrar account to tell them my domain has gotten whacked or hacked. And then I cannot, and not only that, the hacker has access to that. And so they can turn off the 2-factor authentication. They have access to your email now, because that's the email on your domain. It just gets to be a big mess, and you don't have access anymore once that happens. Never ever use the same email address as the domain name. You absolutely need to use something else. Don't use a free email, Gmail account or Hotmail or Outlook. Use something else, register another domain name and use that. Now, next, that gets into number 7. Number 7, which is actually the last one here that I'm going to talk about today, is number 1. This number 7, it may be controversial, and you may or may not, however, this is based on recovering stolen domain names. This advice is not based on, on the, privacy. You need to turn off Whois privacy. And if you need to use the UPS store address, use your business address, use something else, and turn off Whois privacy. Reason being is, number 1 is, there's domain registrars out there that they routinely tell you, and their pitch, buy our domain, our domain protection service, which is Whois privacy. Okay. And somebody will not be able to, give your, find your information from your domain name. Well, that's all, that's great. That actually, number 1, Whois, just because you're on Whois privacy, that absolutely does not stop you from getting your domain name stolen. Let's just put that out there, because unfortunately, there are domain name registrars out there that say, we will protect you. You protect your domain name if you pay for our Whois privacy service. Absolutely not. In fact, turning on Whois privacy is actually risky when it comes to being able to prove the ownership of the domain. So basically, if you have domain privacy, if you do not have it turned on, you're using your business address, okay, as the ownership information of that domain, and that's in the public record. Okay, if someone goes in and steals your domain name, what are they absolutely the first thing they're going to do is they're going to turn on who is privacy, because they do not want anybody to know that who they are, that they don't want that they're a thief, they've hacked your account. They're going to turn on who is privacy so nobody knows. So if you have it turned off and you showing your business address and all of a sudden it's turned on, and then that who is privacy is turned on, and then it's transferred to another domain name registrar, well, that actually is a red flag, and that is almost proof that frankly, it's almost proof that the domain name was stolen. Okay, and so when we go in later on to and to actually, when we go in later on to recover that domain name, we can see who his history and what happened from that okay, your name and your company owned the domain name, and then it changed and went under privacy. Then it was changed, set to another registrar and changed, and still is under privacy. That's information that we use to recover stolen domain names and to be able to show certain things. So anyway, so we've had some glitches here in the Facebook Live, and I think it may be due to Wi-Fi or technical issues. But so that's number 7. So I'm going to go really quickly through everything again and name everything. Number 1, your domain name is your most valuable digital asset. Absolutely guard that as much as possible. And because, like I said, you lose your domain name, you know what? Your website goes down, you lose access to email and so forth. Number 2, take advantage of whatever security options there are. Like two-factor authentication. So also realize that certain registrars are much more secure than others. And so if they're offering two-factor authentication that's sent by email or by text message, frankly, it's not as secure, and you should consider transferring to another registrar. Now, number 3, turn on any kind of registry lock or any kind of service that, on that. Keep in mind that could be turned off, but it may be a little bit more difficult for that. Register your domain name for at least 5 years, and if you can do it for a longer period of time, that would be better. And always better. Number 5, do not ever rely on auto renew. Don't just renew your domain name and just think that, okay, the registrar, I have my credit card in there and they're going to auto renew it when it's time. Well, so many people lose their domain names that way. I can't express how important it is to not rely on auto renew. Number 6, never, ever use a free Gmail account, Gmail, Hotmail, any kind of, free email account. In the exception, as I mentioned, the exception to the rule is basically if you use Google Advanced Protection, you could possibly use Gmail. However, I really don't recommend using any kind of those accounts because if those accounts are compromised, and they do get off and compromised, then people steal domain names that way, then basically the support you're going to get when it comes down to it, the support you're going to get if your Gmail account is hacked or something, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get access back to that account. If your domain name is and you can always change web hosts, and you can still have access to your same domain name and your email address. If they hack your server and you're able, and your email is with another domain name that you own, you can do some things to move stuff around and get access to that email account again. Number 7 is, or number 6 on the list is, do not ever use the same email address as the domain name. I had a situation even in the past 2 or 3 days where somebody had their name.com and they used, their first name at their last name, at their name.com, and they had no access. They had no access whatsoever to the Google, the domain registrar account, or they had no access at all to the domain name and so forth. And so it was just a big mess. Finally, turn off who is privacy considerate. I know that there are privacy services, and especially because of GDPR, a lot of domain name registrars have just gone ahead and says, you know what, we're going to put everybody on privacy. Consider using a business address, and so forth, rather than who is privacy, if at all possible, because of the fact that if your domain name gets stolen and you've registered it for 5 years or so, your record is on there as you being the owner. And what will happen is, frankly, is if someone steals the domain name, they will put it on privacy to hide the fact that they've stolen the domain, and they'll have their identity. So that will be a tip off. There's a bunch of other things, hopefully in another time I'll be able to add, but these are the most the top 7 things and 7 things that you can do right now to go through and make sure you secure your most valuable digital asset, your domain name. And so I do have all these mentioned in a recent blog post on billhartzer.com. You can find it there, and that's the list. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. Certainly you can email me. You can get me on Facebook, and you can also get me on Twitter and some other social media accounts. So just Google my name, Bill Hartzer. You'll be able to find me, and I'll be happy to help steer you in the right direction at no charge. So, like I said, this is the March 31st, 2022 edition of the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast. I'm sorry about the technical issues we've had. Sometimes you just cannot predict those when you're doing things live with Facebook Live and so forth. Sometimes just we have some technical issues, and there's nothing we can do about that. So that said, every week at this time 1:30 Mountain Time, and we're on Facebook Live every week, and we are. I'm also recorded as well, and this is be up on the YouTube channel, and you will find also an audio version on Alexa, as well as Spotify, as well as Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you next week.